I'm going to make a nut bowl just like the one I made in junior high school, except not sandwich light and dark wood. One big block of spalted alder. It has a crack somewhere. Here it is. Here's a crack here. And there's another crack here. This will be the top, and it'll be down here somewhere. The base will be down here. Here's another crack. That will come out when we're making the base. This is an 8-inch block. Almost wish it were 9, but it's 8. I plan to put in only 4 screws so I can have the center a couple of inches undamaged. All of this is going to come off anyway, so it doesn't matter, but even so, 4 screws should be enough. I hope. 42, 43. Ooh boy, no idea it's so wet. It's not green though, it's just full of water. Well, this is the spalted alder blank I put on last night. It was 40-some% moisture. It's cracked already in my desert dry basement. Hope those aren't too deep. I want to make a nut bowl out of this. It's going to be pretty much straight-sided, maybe a little wider at the bottom. Yeah, foot and a tenon. It's mounted on the faceplate. Tail stock support, as long as it's not in the way. Jacket zipped up to my chin. Trying the air shield on. 5/8 bowl gouge. I switched to a 1/2-inch spindle gouge to finish the dovetail tenon. And the 5/8 bowl gouge to finish the outside. interesting patterns of spalt and grain, but the lighter parts are extremely punky. Back to the spindle gouge. Parts of the wood are so punky I can't get a smooth cut. I'll try a scraper. I try a very light shear scrape. The tear out is very deep in places. Lots and lots of tear out here. I think I want to stabilize this with CA. Or do I want to use thinned epoxy? Which I've never done before. Gotta do something here. One channel I watch, a man thins resin with denatured alcohol. Epoxy I have, and the cleanup is acetone. Before I apply epoxy, thinned or not, I need to clear away some of the excess wood up here to expose what will be the rim of the bowl. A little bit of 5-to-1 foot-load epoxy, fast hardener, and just a little bit of acetone as a thinner. Don't know if that's proper or not, but that's what I did. Going around the second time now, got a lot of dry spots. Dry because it's soaked in, not because I missed. And the end grain, of course, side grain's fine. Back around here to more end grain. This end grain drinks it up as though it were sanding sealer. I thinned the epoxy with acetone because that's what I use for cleanup. I gave the epoxy a few minutes to begin setting up before I removed it from the lathe. Could be disaster waiting to happen here. Let me do it this way. Reverse on both ends. Voila. Next day on the Spalted Punky Alder nut bowl, epoxy has sunk in, dripped off. So what I need to do is just return this, fine-tuning it. Looks like a job for scraping. Now this is not just wood dust, this is epoxy dust. This is the sound of the air pump in my Trend air shield, and this is the sound of my dust exhaust fan. This will be the first time I've ever turned epoxy. In watching other videos of people turning epoxy, I'm appalled at the mess it makes. The shavings aren't wood that you can just throw out on the ground. They're plastic, get into everything, and have to be disposed of. I'm about to get a taste of that myself. I gather up large clumps of epoxy shavings and put them in the trash. Before the bowl was smooth and true again, I was cutting into wood. All the epoxy has now been scraped, but it still needs a little more tuning. I'll use a straight skew to scrape the foot. Solidified drips of epoxy have to come off the bottom of the bowl itself. And off the bottom of the foot. In some spots I've scraped all the way through the epoxy and down into the punky wood, so I'll start the sanding with 80 grit. Sanded through 240, very smooth. Thanks for all that epoxy in there. Finally, it's time to turn it around. I put a guard over my spindle lock button so I don't accidentally push it instead of the stop button, which really hurts my finger. Now I have to open the door to push the button. held up at the top. Oh yeah, there it is. I'm not going to start this till I can finish it, which means tomorrow. So, that is why I'm working on this today, because I can finish this today. We are not quite flat on the jaws. I detect no irregularities. We are clean here. We didn't change shape on we, did we? Oh-ho. Oh-ho. Here's the problem. These have increased the thickness of this, so it's bumping down here. I fiddled around with this for another 20 minutes before finally deciding I'm never going to get it perfect. Might as well keep going. 1200 RPM. Oh. Epoxy hurts. Epoxy chips are harder and sharper than wood chips. Extrude the entire surface before hollowing. I wanted the center pedestal exactly the same height as the rim. Now it was a simple matter to use the scraper to go all the way to the bottom. I had more than a half-inch farther to go, and I was already reaching farther over the rest than I'm comfortable doing. I moved the tool rest as close to the work as I could. These chips are really wet. I'm going to continue roughing this out with the scraper and tune it up with gouges. Forgot to turn the fan on. Not very dusty because this is pretty wet. Take a lot of cleanup. This should have been a little bit bigger. Got to come way down on wall thickness when we do it with a gouge. Got about that much on the bottom. That's probably pretty good. It's going to be about what the same as what the sides are going to be. Okay, I'm going to sharpen the spindle gouge before I proceed. This is slowly becoming an asymmetric grind. Short wing here, long wing here. Two of my gurus on YouTube do that. The gouge leaves it smoother than the scraper, but still not smooth enough. That's a little better, but the damp, punky wood does not slice cleanly. The corner is too sharp for a gouge, so I'll use round carbide. Well, it's ready for sanding, and I'm ready for a beer. I'd like to begin with 60 or 80 grit. The 120 is the coarsest grit I have in sheet sandpaper, at least that I can lay my hands on. Bottom's a little rough in the corner. 3/8 bowl gouge. See if we can get in there and take a little of that out without getting a nasty catch. Like that. I think it might be okay there. A little more sanding. A lot more sanding. Always more sanding. This is not nearly as punky as the outside was, but there are rough areas that I just can't get out without spending more of the rest of my life working on it than I plan to or want to. The only way I was going to get a smooth finish on the inside was with epoxy, but I forgot to thin it with acetone, so it's running very slowly. Okay, the bottom is covered. I've got so much in here I could smear the entire outside. Let me get a glove on and I'll do that. There's the nut bowl full of epoxy. Been sitting overnight and it's cured, covered with blush. What I'd like to do is just wash off the blush and call it finished. But there are areas that are not glossy because the epoxy soaked all the way into the wood. Lumpy areas I got to take off anyway. So it's going back on the lathe. Are we spinning through? Inside is, outside isn't, but that's the way it was yesterday. So I'll just take all this down, scrapers as much as possible. These big lumps like this. Yeah, I don't know. I refreshed the burr on the scraper with a diamond card in between sessions at the grinding wheel. The outside of the bowl is no longer round. I'll have to scrape much deeper than I wanted to. The scraper is flying over the low spots and cutting into the wood on the high ones. At long last, the outside of the bowl is round again. Now for the rim. I'd planned for the center post and the rim to be exactly the same height, but now I'm lowering the rim a little bit, but the epoxy coating on top of the center post is so nice I haven't got the heart to scrape it off. Parts of this went deeper than I like, and now it's rough again. I'm not going to put in more epoxy though. Still a little epoxy right here. Got it all off the rim. Now the post in the middle is a 16th high, but I don't think there's any harm in that. I didn't give the difference in height between rim and center post any more thought until it was time to take the tenon off. I tried to remove the drips of epoxy with a hand chisel, knowing they would come off like bullets if the lathe was spinning, but they were too hard and I gave up. I was pleasantly surprised to discover that with a very sharp chisel and moving very slowly, those lumps of epoxy came off as shavings rather than chunks. I cleaned up the foot, scraping with a skew. The wet bowl had changed shape after I turned the outside, and again after I turned the inside. I think this is not going to be fun to sand. I think the remaining epoxy is going to come up sandpaper more or less instantly. The epoxy gums up sandpaper in a hurry. Well, it's imperfect. I hope it'll look better with the finish on there. Finish is going to be urethane on this one. This one. Outside's not bad, but inside's a little rugged in places. I set the bowl in the warm outflow from the dehumidifier to speed drying. Have the nut bowl back on the lathe. The outside still got some runs from the urethane. I've got to sand down. Mostly I have to scrape the bottom because there's some pretty severe epoxy and urethane runs there. And looks like, I don't know what caused that gouge. It's just right there. So anyway, I've got a little bit of work to do all over. Maybe one more coat of urethane, or maybe just go straight to axe, depending on how much is left after I even that up. So that's what's on tap first for today. The down bowl has changed shape again. The bottom of the bowl is too irregular and too far from the tool rest for this big scraper, so I'll switch to carbide. I'm really getting tired of dealing with epoxy shavings. Well, this is never going to be as nice as I had hoped. And it's out of shape enough that I'm getting down into rough wood again. The bowl continued to change shape. I was already down through the epoxy into bare wood again. It was never going to be as nice as I'd hoped. And this is going to tear up sandpaper in a hurry. This did not shine up the way I'd hoped it would, but it's the best I am going to do. It's got rough spots. I'm not going to put lipstick on this pig and put urethane on it. Put urethane on the undersides. This is coming off, so I'll just put urethane here and here flip it, get the rest of it. This urethane I've been using, I got originally to refinish a dining table. It worked nicely for that, so I've been using it for this too. A little rough spot right there, kind of an acne scar. Other than that, the exterior is not bad. Okay, this might take another coat later, maybe not. The only task remaining today is to give this a light sanding and axe treatment, turn off the tenon, bore tool holes, and this troublesome critter will be done. Axe abrasive paste to smooth the finish. You feel it go from gritty to smooth as it does its job. Clean the stuff off. Need more speed, closer to the center. Okay, that was 1500. Go slowly to buff it off, so you don't heat it up and melt it. And that's done, except for taking off the tenon. This post is taller than the rim by 2 or 3 millimeters. Okay, need to true up the foot. It's got drips of epoxy on it, and take out the tenon. Start as usual, 3/8 bowl gouge. Spindle. Right along in here, I'm telling myself, stop when you say to yourself, just one more. Don't flip this one off the lathe. With the bevel against the bowl and the speed turned way down to 300 or 400, I can cut the nib and the gouge will hold the bowl. See how punky this wood is. That you can dig holes in that with a thumbnail. It's a good thing the bottom was very thick. It took lots and lots of sanding with 60 grit to get rid of that hole in the middle. I didn't go through my entire finishing procedure on the bottom. I put on sanding sealer, and when that dried, Johnson's paste wax. When this wax is dry, I'll buff it a little bit, and this one will be done. Now I can go have a beer and watch football. I used the drill press and 1/4 inch and 3/8 inch Forstner bits to cut holes for the nutcracker and the picks. I used Forstner bits to get clean entries so I wouldn't chip the finish. If this project proves anything, it's that given enough time and effort, you can salvage anything. Whether it's worth it is open to question. Thanks for watching.